Morning, everyone. Studying an existing protocol. I just want to appreciate Executive Director for this particular body that's Women Mining Africa. That's Dr. Comfort Asokolo. And that's an amazing one you did there. Thank you so much, amiable chairman, Dr. Ahmed Wadai Kaka. So nice to see you here, sir. And
Thank you.
Dr. Emi Akimusiri, Vice Chair, amiable Vice Chair. Thank you so very much what you guys are doing. I was hoping I was going to speak immediately after our indefatigable Dr. Apatira, but obviously maybe our network disconnected her because I knew she was here some minutes ago. Okay, let me start with a story. Last year a research team spent 3 months in the field chasing what they thought was groundbreaking insights. They interviewed miners, mapped sites, analyzed samples, the whole heroic adventure. And on the final day, after all the sweat and sunburn, the lead researcher looked at the data and said, the legendary words every researcher fears. That is, oh no, this is just dirt. So that's artisanal mining sector for you. 1 minute you are Indiana Jones, the next minute you are a confused tourist holding a bucket of mud. So before we repeat their fate, I'm talking in terms of researchers now. There's one thing that that turns good research into waste straw. Maybe it's politics, maybe it's language, maybe it's one stakeholder who vanishes like, a Marvel villain. We should just look at it and try and jot down what do we think are the limitations to a good research work. Is it politics? Is it language barrier? Is it the stakeholders? We can minute it down on the chat, perhaps put it across. All right, thank you. Going forward, I will be speaking on the challenges faced using research for transformation of artisanal mining in Africa. Okay, we might want to ask, I really thank Dr. Akimusire because I was listening to her and I said, oh, it's looking like I'll be repeating most of the things she said because she was able to dissect what the artisanal mining is and the role research plays. So briefly, I'll just quickly take us through what is artisanal mining and what is research and where's the link between both. Small scale, that is artisanal mining is small scale informal mining with minimal tech, low capital, and high manual labor. It's often unregulated and is usually in most remote areas. Yet it supports the millions of livelihood across Africa. So on the other hand, research is the systematic process of collecting, validating, analyzing, and interpreting data. Generates reliable knowledge for decision-making, innovation, and strategic transformation. That is research. Analyzing data, interpreting data, and bringing up reliable knowledge for decision-making. That is what we understand as research. And now we want to say, okay, why is research essential? Why do we need research in artisanal mining? First, it enables us to understand the sector, the scale, the demographics of mining, the operations, and the economic value. I remember Dr. Akimusire mentioned the economic value of mining in these various sectors or these various parts of the world, starting with Africa and to the US. Okay, it is when we engage in research that we can also identify the risk. Because I remember when Dr. Ahmed Kaka was also talking, he mentioned things like the environmental hazards that comes with this small scale mining because of the unrefined, unregulated process it carries. So we need to identify the risk. Well, that is one of the essentials of research. We identify the risk through the environmental risk, the health risk, the safety, and the social hazards that comes with the small scale mining. Now, we also have, the research enables us to have come up with informed policies, because it's when we come up with informed policies that we can now have modernization and formalization of the mining sector. Also, it helps to protect miners. When we carry out this research, we now see the dangers that the miners are into, and we can help bring up policies too that protects them, and make the form of exploration, become more safer than it were. Then it also drives transformation. That's another essential of research. Making the whole mining process inclusive, practical, scalable, and brings about sustainable change. Also, going forward, we might ask, okay, how is research a tool for transformation? We look at the differences, from where it was and what it is right now in terms of if we have to apply research, what transformation will it bring about in the mining sector? Before now, the mining sector, since it's a small scale, that is artisanal mining, since it's been done in a small scale, it's more of an informal setting. So we transform it from a form of informality to a formal system. Another aspect is we transform it from manual labor, because these are individuals going into that sector, going into those places to carry out things. They being ignorant of the risk involved. We talked about cancer. They're open to cancer, open to a whole lot of hazardous situations. So the local or the manual way it was done, when we apply research, it transforms it to technological integration. Okay. Another aspect is the risk. The risk involved in the artisanal mining is really high. But when we apply research, we discover that there's a transformation from the high level of risk to safety-driven mining. That's in the same artisanal mining sector. Also, the exploitative markets. So just like Dr. Akim Misura, I'll make reference to our presentation more often, because she actually delved into it and dissected it very, very well, because she talked about the fact that for this artisanal miners, they get exploited because they just do this thing manually and do not know the value of those things out there in the market. They do it sometimes just for something that is worth maybe millions of dollars. Because of the level of extracting those things, they get to give it out for very few thousands of dollars. So the exploitative market, because of the unregulation and all of that, we transform it through research to ethical markets. So another aspect of transformation is that it transforms from the environmental degradation. We know that the risk involved, like what happened in cobalt, where they were extracting cobalt. I think was it in Zambia? Congo, sorry, Democratic Republic of Congo. When they were extracting cobalt, we discovered the cave, the place they were extracting this thing, it caved in, and before you knew what was happening, thousands of lives, went in that process. So it's apart from the health and the dangers, the risk, the environmental degradation that comes with this extraction and this artisanal mining aspect is looked into, and it's being transformed into a sustainable extraction, which makes it better and more sustainable. Okay, now we look at the challenges we have, that research faces with the aspect of artisanal mining. One of it is informal and decentralized. The mining activities lack a formal structure. So having to, extract data, there's a lot of data limitation when you have to meet some of this. Some of this limitation even goes with the aspect of language. For someone who maybe all you know is English, for example, and you're going into maybe a French environment or a Francophone environment to do research in terms of how those things are done and better ways to go about it. If there is no means of communication, you cannot communicate with this artisanal miners. It becomes difficult to extract data. So the informal and decentralized system is one of the major challenges. Then the poor documentation, absence of digital tracking systems. When we do not have the right tracking systems being applied in this particular sector, it makes it difficult, to get the right documentation, the right data, to enable our research to become more credible. So now the unclear metrics, which involves the miner population, the production, and the revenue. You cannot evaluate it. You cannot, there are no measures to measure up what it is that is maybe the miners population, their production level, and the revenue they generate from this thing because of the informal setting that comes with artisanal mining. Okay, we look at the challenges to be, one of it is also the accessibility and participation. I said, okay, I think I mentioned aspect of language. I said accessibility barriers includes remote and unsafe and difficult to reach sites. Some of the sites are far, not so reachable. So for you as a researcher to go find those areas, that cases where you might even find your health, being at risk, so those accessibility barriers are there. And it also, goes along with weak infrastructure, limited electricity, communication, like I mentioned earlier, then a high cost and risk of prolonged field studies. If you need to go into the real remote areas where the artisanal miners are to carry out this research, to make it valid enough, you discover that a lot of things involved, which includes high risk and of prolonged field studies. It's not something you go in today and you're out tomorrow. You could be on the field, trying to extract data, even for as high as 3 to 6 months, sometimes a year. It's a lot of risk you stand to suffer at that level. And the low research participation, for some miners, they have this thing of, I do not know you well enough to give you the needed information, that you need as a researcher. They just look at you and feel, okay, there's a lot of invasion into their, because of also the level of their understanding. So there's this low participation from the part of the miners, to give you the needed data that could enable your research, move to level of credibility for the purpose of transformation. So, and there's also that reluctance to engage in data collection. So all of that are part of the things, one of the challenges that research is faced with when it comes to artisanal mining. Also, we have cases of mistrust and funding. I remember we have one of our fellows, I think about 2 of our fellows who are working in the mining sector. And I remember when we had the research cohort, that was in the month of June, for CISR, we had one of them who spoke about the mining sector. His research paper was actually built around it. And when he was making his presentation, he was talking about the fact that, sometimes some NGOs will come into this mining sector, act like, okay, we want to help you with proper machineries. And I'm sure most of them approach these artisanal miners, want to help you with the proper machineries to see how we can fund your project to make it better and all of that. And before you know what's happening, these data are extracted, they go back and because at the end of the day, the funds not come back to, they don't even get to the people that you have to get to. So there's this aspect of mistrust, in terms of funding and logistic constraints also. So those are part of the challenges that comes because fear of sanctions, taxations, or displacements. Suspicion of foreign exploitation. There's this artisanal miners are suspicious of, when you come, you're far away and you're coming to extract the data from them. They're like, oh, does this person want to come and take over our business? Do they want to come and take over our sites and all of that? So there's this level of mistrust that comes from the artisanal miners, and that hampers the level of research as it should be. Okay, we have other aspects of challenges which involves policy and technology. We have policy adoption challenges, and that includes a disconnect between research and policy priorities. Also, another aspect is slow implementation of evidence-based reforms. Just like we heard earlier, there are times, it's not like we're talking about research now for the first time. I believe the aspect of research may have been applied even long before now in aspects of artisanal mining, but you discover that sometimes the findings we come out with, our arguments and all of that, are not put into policies for policy formulations to aid that sector. And it's really, really sad. It's a challenge where sometimes we carry out this research, then adopting them in terms of policy, implementation and upgrade becomes a problem. So there's no implementation of evidence-based reforms. There's political interference. I brought up the issue of the story I said earlier. Discovered that some researchers would think they have actually done it, only discover that, wow, yeah, what were we doing all the while? Discovered that there's a lot of interference and a lot of things that have actually hampered the success of that research. So we have, on the other hand, we have lack of technological integration. We have absence of digital systems for the real-time data. We have poor internet penetration for data submission. I also have limited access to labs. We need to have labs, we need to have monitoring tools that can enable us test this data, these things we have actually gotten, this raw materials we've gotten from the field. We need to have a way of analyzing them and have labs of processing some of this information to enable us give informed decisions in our research work. Okay, going forward, I think what that should be the last, the second to the last challenge that is being faced in terms of research, the challenges being faced by research in the aspect of artisanal mining. Another part of it is the ethics and human rights. We discover that what applies in one country may not apply in the other, even if we're still talking about the same artisanal mining. I believe that the aspect of the policies in the USA is not the same in Africa. There are a lot of limitations apart from the machines and all of that. For artisanal miners in the US, you discover that because they are given the right tools, they can give better results. But for those in the remote areas, and most especially within Africa, you discover that there are no human rights in place to enable those people to exploit or do what they need to do confidently and let's say with much economic support. So the ethics and human rights are not put in place, and that's one aspect that's been faced, we researchers will face when we want to look at artisanal mining. And there is need to protect the miners. Their safety is important, their identity is important, and their rights as well. It's very, very important. We look at the aspects of gender, child labor, and human rights. We discovered that if you want to look at it, a lot of young people who are those artisanal miners, we discovered that the population of artisanal miners has to do with the younger population. The older population, maybe have done it when they were young. But if you go with research right now, discover that it's a younger population. They are more into artisanal mining. That's why I'm glad we're talking about youth and artisanal mining in Africa. The gender, discover that females, the child labor acts are there but are not implemented. So it gives limited intervention frameworks. It brings about risk of backlash when systemic issues are exposed. That is one of the challenges we also face in artisanal mining. Okay, and now generally, let's look at the true challenge. That is transforming the untransformed. And that goes to the miners themselves. A lot of them are just okay with what they're doing. They do not want your transformation, and that's the very huge challenge. They're just okay with what they're doing. They don't want to know whatever it is you want to bring to them. And that limits the access of research into artists. They are okay, they feel okay that the environment doesn't need to get to a level of being sustainable. They don't need a sustainable environment. They look at, okay, if at all you must do this. But we want to look at it that if we are to transform the untransformed, which are those artisanal miners, we must look at ensuring that we give them sustainable environments is very essential. They must become inclusive in the economic models of their country. Also, we look at modernized way of handling the artisanal mining sector so that it becomes more and more meaningful, even for the remote people. So also look at the ethical governance systems, they look at the health risk, the safety and all of that. We bring up models as researchers. Those are ways we can implement in actually dealing with transforming the artisanal mining sector. And I think at this juncture, having recommended the fact that we should come up with sustainable environments, inclusive economic models, and modernized operations with proper ethical governance systems, I believe the artisanal mining sector will be transformed through research. Thank you so much.